Are our estimates of inflation misleading? Another central metric of modern capitalism is inflation, a single, simplified value that seeks to measure how the cost of goods and services changes over time. In keeping with international standards, inflation is measured via the Consumer Prices Index, or CPI, which measures the change in the price of a basket of commodities over the course of a year. There are several ways in which inflation may be triggered. The first is when the demand for a given commodity, such as lithium for electric batteries, outstrips its supply, pushing up the price people are willing to pay. The second arises when the supply of a product suddenly declines, as happens when grain exports drop after war or drought, pushing up prices. A third occurs when central banks print currency to increase the money supply, thereby diluting its effective purchasing power. So who are the winners and losers in this inflation game? The winners, if there are any, are those charging premium prices for goods and services, and those who suddenly owe interest at rates far lower than that of inflation. The big losers are of course those with savings, those who bought government bonds at lower rates of interest, and everyone on a salary whose purchasing power has suddenly been sharply eroded. If you happen to own gold, silver, farmland, or real estate without debts, then a surge in inflation may be a storm that you are well positioned to ride out. So, ultimately, inflation also serves as an effective means of transferring wealth from those who pay rents to those who receive them, while hyperinflation rapidly erodes the wealth of the wider population. To be fair to economists, the CPI seeks to make a broad calculation based on a basket of around 1,000 goods, from food and furniture to travel and tobacco. The problem is that different people consume different quantities of each category, and sometimes none at all, and so the CPI attempts to allocate a weighting to each subcategory. So, if the price of a loaf of bread doubles in a year, and its weighting is 0.1, then its weighted contribution to inflation is only 20%, when the actual price increase was 100%. So, when we are talking in terms of averages of weighted averages, then the true inflation figure is rapidly drowned in a process of dilution. An interesting set of alternative figures is provided by the website Trueflation. This database suggests that true inflation peaked at almost 60% for housing, almost 90% for gas, electricity, and water, and 15% for food and beverages. Obviously, the more one spends on critical resources such as food, electricity, warmth, and shelter, the less one has to spend on tobacco, entertainment, or clothes, a reality that will tend to cause a corresponding downward pressure on the prices of these goods and services as demand falls relative to supply. Thus, whether the government's measure of the CPI at just over 10%, at the time of writing, is in agreement with the Trueflation estimate of almost 17% is largely irrelevant, as this fails to reflect the reality on the ground for those living on median wages. So what alternative could provide us with a more honest metric? For this, we would have to revert to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and simply seek to calculate 3 tiers based on priorities. By determining net income after tax increases and debt repayments, the essential costs of living in terms of energy, food, accommodation, and transport can be deducted. This would provide us with a more earnest figure, one which gives the true net disposable income for goods and services which provide us with an improved quality of life. Thank you for listening. Please feel free to comment below.